taking time to show up tonight. My name is Chris Martino, and I am the superintendent for Riverside Local School District. Tonight it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Zern, Lake County Treasurer, who's going to spend a little bit of time talking about property taxes and the impact of property tax reform and what happens if we abolish property taxes completely. And that impacts directly to the school district, which is why we are hosting, but also to townships, which is why we are happy to partner with Kingsville Township specifically for tonight's presentation. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Michael Zern, Lake County Treasurer.
Welcome everybody. We're going to take a look at property taxes in Ohio, and it's going to be, there's a couple different sections of what I'm going to go over. The first section is going to cover new legislation that passed late last year and how it's going to impact property taxes. We're going to take a look at proposed legislation and what that could do to property taxes. And then we're going to take a deep look at what property taxes pay for, the services right here in Lake County that are paid for through your property taxes. So the first thing that I would like to cover is something that happened last year in June. There was legislation that allowed each county to make a decision if they want to double homestead and double the occupancy credit. So this happened in December of last year in Lake County, and what it has done is for seniors, anybody who qualifies for the homestead exemption, when you got your tax bill about a month and a half ago, you would have been pleasantly surprised that your homestead exemption doubled. So that probably was a $300 to $700 additional credit on your taxes. So your taxes probably went down last year if you were on homestead. And also the occupancy credit. So anybody who lives in their house, anybody who is a primary resident, that was also doubled by the county commissioners. This program has to be approved each year. So it was approved for this tax year, 2026. So if the commissioners approve it again next tax year, that will remain, and you'll see a double occupancy credit and a double homestead credit. And I have a copy of the actual property tax bill for Lake County. So they changed the name of the homestead exemption to HOM. The reason for that is the first half of the homestead exemption actually comes from the state. It's reimbursed from the state. The second half is just not charged locally. So they renamed it HOM, state and local. And the same thing for the occupancy credit. It was renamed to show that it's being reimbursed. Half of it is by the state, and the other half of it is just not charged locally. So I want to take a look at some of the new property tax laws and how it's going to impact property taxes. Most of these laws that passed late last year in December through the State House will really not take effect for 3 years. But you're going to start to see some savings, and by the third year you should see a pretty big savings. So this one is a pretty powerful piece of legislation that passed. This is House Bill 124, and it gives county auditors the ability to determine how to reevaluate properties, so the recent sales data. So in the past, when an appraisal was done, they would look for the top sales in the area, maybe the top 10 sales in a 3-year period, and that's what they would use to reevaluate property. This gives them the ability to determine what the probable value of a property is. So in a neighborhood, if you're going to list your house for sale, you're probably going to repaint it, you're probably going to put new carpeting on it, you're probably going to look for ways to make the curb appeal better, you're going to maximize the dollars you can get for that property. Most people's houses are not fixed up that way. Most people are living in their houses, and there are some things that they may need to do to bring it up to top dollar and top value for the community. So it's not realistic when you're reevaluating a property to use the pristine house that was just listed, because the average house in that property, and the average house in the neighborhood probably needs some work to bring it up to that value. So this gives auditors a lot of leeway when they revalue properties every 3 years, that they don't have to show the highest value. So this will make a big difference, but 2027 in Lake County is the next time we revalue properties. So in the 2028 tax bill, this will have a big impact. The next one is House Bill 129, and this is a bill that if a school district doesn't receive 20 mils of taxes on levies that they have on the books, this would require when properties are reevaluated that the taxes brings them up to 20 mils in tax collection for that school district. This had a huge impact in 2025 when the tax bills went out. There was about $13 to $14 million more collected due to this issue in Lake County. And what this bill does, it kind of closes the gap. So if it's a school district and they have levies that are called emergency levies, and there are some school districts in Lake County, this would force those emergency levies to be included in the 20 mil floor, which would greatly reduce how much money is added to additional tax collection. And House Bill 129 is really focusing on when houses are revaluated and there's unvoted increases in taxes. This closes that loophole by adding all levies into the 20 mil floor. All right, this one is another good bill. This passed in December of 2025. And this also happened last time the properties were revaluated in Lake County. In Lake County, in 2024, the value of houses with their revaluation went up about 30%. So when you got your notice in the mail, you probably saw that the county revalued your house quite a bit. 30% was the average, and everyone's taxes went up on average about 12%. And that is an unvoted increase. That is just through what the value of the property is determined by the county. So this is a bill that controls those changes. So this bill right here is putting a cap on it based on inflation. So in 2027, if house prices should soar again, and they go up 30%, and the inflation over the last 3 years is, let's just take an example, 3%, 3%, and 3%, that'd be a 9% inflation rate over 3 years. That would be the maximum it could go up. It couldn't go up any higher than that. So this would limit any type of unvoted tax increase based on home valuations, based on inflation, and not if prices surge. So this is another way to control property tax increases. This is my favorite bill. This bill, I've been talking to the representatives and the senators for a couple of years now. And this is the treasurer and the auditor and the prosecutor in every county, they're on a board. And every year, the board is called the Budget Commission. Every year, the schools come in, all the government agencies come in, and they present their budget for the year. They say, this is how much we're going to spend, and this is how much we're going to collect in taxes, and this is how much surplus we have. Now, every year, prior to this year, we just sat there and listened to their explanation on the budget and the income that they're going to bring in through taxes, and there was nothing we could do. We signed off on the budget. This changes everything. So if you have a huge surplus and you're a government entity, and you come into the Budget Commission, and you present your budget, and you have a huge surplus, and we determine you don't need the taxes that year. We could freeze the levy. This Budget Commission can freeze the levy, we can not collect the taxes, and then we can look at it again the next year. This will have a huge impact on government agencies that have a large surplus of money. So this is a great bill. I'm glad this one finally went through. So some other this is another a bill that the last one that went through in December of 2025, and this limits the increase on inside millage. So inside millage, just to give a real quick example, is 10 mils on everyone's tax bill has never been voted on. The state of Ohio, 50, 60 years ago, decided that every county is going to have 10 mils of taxation on property that can go to the county or that can go to schools. And it increases when houses are evaluated based on the value of the property. What this bill does is it limits the increase of inside millage, and the increase that it could happen per year. So this is another way to keep taxes under control. Okay, so this is, there's a couple different statistics I want to talk about. So these 5 bills have passed in December of 2025. So if you're a senior and you're getting homestead, this year you're probably seeing anywhere from a $300 to $1,000 decrease in your taxes due to the credits with doubling the homestead and the occupancy credit, and also what these 5 bills are doing. If you're not on either one of those, if it is not a homestead credit that you receive, you're probably receiving about $128 in less taxes, in either a credit or less taxes this year than last year. If you look at year 2, based on these 5 different pieces of legislation that passed, you would see about a $300 to a $350 decrease in your taxes. And year 3, when it really kicks in the full effect, it would probably be around $400 to $450 less based on what these 5 bills are going to do. So it will have an impact. It's just going to take a while to kick in. So there's some additional proposals, and I think these are really good to talk about because they're going to have a big impact. So the House Bill 673 expands the owner occupancy credit to all levies. So this is a very small credit. Usually people see a couple $100 on their tax bill. This will make that a little bit greater. It won't have a huge impact, but it's another credit that will increase on the property tax bill. So there are some actual bills. Senate Bill 81 proposes freezing property taxes for seniors. This has an income limitation of $70,000. So this is a bill that is out there. And if any of these bills that I go over, if you're supportive of them, the best thing to do would be to contact your state representative or your senator and let them know that you're supportive of these bills. There's 2 more that I want to talk about. House Bill 443, this is one of the bills I've been pretty involved in. In Lake County, we have taken the stance for the last 5 years. If somebody is disabled, if they're a senior on homestead, we do not foreclose on them. That's our policy in Lake County at the Treasurer's Office. We work with them, and we will not foreclose. But this takes it through the state of Ohio. So this would, if the house is valued under $750,000 and they are a senior on homestead, then the house cannot be foreclosed on. So I think this is a really good bill for the state of Ohio. And then Senate Bill 206, that is a 50% reduction for somebody who is 65 years or older. So if you're a proponent of any of these proposals, please contact your state rep or your senator. So these are some statistics that I pulled off of the internet. There was a research study that was done in August of 2025 about eliminating property taxes, and this is the only one I could find where there's actually been a survey that's been done out there, and it does show that 61% of Ohioans favor eliminating property taxes. And then between Republicans and Democrats, it's the same. It's about 40%. This is something I really want to point out, what's happened to the state budget. I think when you look at the whole picture of property taxes, you can see what's going on at the state level, what's going on at the local level. And if you look at this chart, you can see over the last 50 years, the percentage of Ohio's economy that is the state budget was in 1977, it was 5.87%. It has doubled. So this year, out of the state economy, the Ohio state budget is 11.43%. So government spending is increasing not only dollar-wise, but percentage-wise. And I think this is pretty insightful of what's going on statewide. So I try to look up the reasons why the state budget was increasing over the last 50 years, like what were the main reasons why they're spending so much more money. And in the 70s and 80s, it was education and welfare. Those two groups were a big part of the state budget. But since 1990, Medicare has been one of the largest growing components of the state budget. So it's just some information to consider when you're looking at the whole picture of taxation. I also wanted to just kind of cover this briefly. Taxes, when you look at property, about 2/3 of it is residential and about 1/3 of it is commercial. So when you break that down, everyone in the community is being taxed, but this is the percentage that is coming from residents and commercial usage. So I want to take a look at what are property taxes paid for. So it's about $23.9 billion a year in the state of Ohio is what property taxes collect. So what would happen if we eliminated property taxes? What does that pay for? How would that affect you? That's what we're going to kind of go over right here. So I don't know if anybody can see this chart. It's pretty small, but this is my favorite chart. What I'm trying to show here is when you get your tax bill, in the middle, it says distribution. So when you look under the distribution line on your tax bill, the first thing it says is Lake County. So what does Lake County, what does that mean? What does Lake County pay for? It could be $300 or $400. That's probably the typical amount that is going to Lake County. Now Lake County covers all the county services. So when you look at it, job and family services, all the things they do is covered out of that line. When you look at the next line, it's Deepwood. So all the Deepwood and all the residents that they take care of, all the different programs that they have with Broadmoor and all the different schools, that is paid out of the Lake County line on your property taxes. Mental health, the Adams Board, that's paid out of your property taxes off that one line that says Lake County. Narcotics Division, so Pat Hanks, he's a fantastic officer. He runs that division and he does so much good, and that is paid out of the Lake County line. You have the senior citizen services. So I work a lot with Council on Aging. They do so much good. Anything from Meals on Wheels to in-home health, to in-home service, to driving seniors to their doctor's appointments, to driving seniors to the grocery store, to giving seniors options to live in the property and maintain their lifestyle. That's coming through the Lake County line. And then emergency, there's fire, but those are what's being paid through the county, through that one line, the Lake County line from disbursements. And I think this is, when you really dig deep into property taxes and you try to understand how come the state of Ohio is spending more money, spending a larger percentage, and there's more and more property taxes local, we're paying more local. And I think this is part of the piece of the puzzle, is when you look at income taxes in the state of Ohio over the last 50 years. They've gone down drastically. So a lot of that is being pushed onto the local level. So you have, in 1985, about 9% for income tax, and then you come down to this year, it's 2.75%. And a lot of that money that's not being collected is being pushed onto the local level and has to be raised in each county. And I think that's part of the reason taxes have gone up so much. All right, so we're going to look at some of the different issues with property taxes. So I kind of want to break this down. But does anyone have an idea? You can just shout it out. Does anyone have an idea? The property taxes that are collected in Lake County, what percentage stays in Lake County? Anybody have an idea? 100%. Yeah, all the property taxes stay right here in Lake County. They do not go to Columbus. So all the services that we have are paid through by property taxes. And I have one other question. So when you look at a township's budget, you look at a city's budget, you look at a school's budget, on average, what percentage in Ohio of their budget is funded by property taxes? Anybody have an idea? Any guesses? 65%. So 65% of everything, your county, your city, your township, your schools, your libraries, it's coming from property taxes. This gives a breakdown of property taxes and where they go. So roughly on average, about 60% of property taxes go to the schools, to run the schools, and then 40% go to pay for everything else. So the roads, I live in Concord, and for me, roads are pretty important because, you know, sometimes in winter it's kind of rough in Concord, or I would imagine Leroy or Madison, but that's a real big issue for me. And also libraries, senior programs, that's where the rest of the property taxes go. All right, so, you know, what could happen if property taxes are eliminated or reduced? And these are some of the things that could be in jeopardy, and that would be police and safety forces. So to me, if I call the police, I want them to show up. If I call the fire department, I want them to be there. I mean, they're emergency personnel and extremely important. But with property taxes, if it's reduced or eliminated, that could have a huge impact on the number of police, the number of fire, and the response times. Education, you know, it's extremely important to educate our children. My view on education is I got to go to school for free when I was 5 years old. Don't ask me to pay for school. I got to go for free, and it was paid through up until 12th grade, and I went on and got my PhD from there. And I just don't understand. We have to educate our children. We have to prepare them to be successful adults. The next one is infrastructure, roads, bridges. Once again, I live in Concord. That's extremely important to me. Parks, recreation. I think in Lake County we are blessed. We have a lot of metro parks that offer a lot. I have 4 children, so it is extremely important to me with the parks. Social services, mental health, addiction. There's a crisis all over the United States and in Ohio and in Lake County, and these are very important to help people reestablish their lives and contribute to our society. Libraries, senior services, I kind of went over some of the senior services, but those are vital to keep seniors in their home and maintain their standard of living. One of the things that they talked about in Columbus about eliminating property taxes and lowering expenses is merging schools and merging libraries and merging cities and townships together. They all have some pretty significant ramifications. In a township, you don't pay income tax. If that would happen to merge into a city, I believe you'd have a 2% income tax. So right away, you know, they may be saving money by consolidating police and fire and other things, but then everyone in the township now has a 2% income tax. So you have to weigh the pros and cons. School districts, there was talk about making each county a school district. And I don't know how that would work, but if you're going to merge every school district in Lake County into one school district, I just think they're vastly different when you're looking at one side of the county to the other. I think that would be really challenging, and I tried to research that. Like, what would that save? If you took, I think there's 11 school districts, if you took 11 school districts and you just made them one in Lake County, which I think right there is a huge problem. But if you did that, what the information I had is the first year there would be a savings, and the second year there would be a loss. You would actually be spending more because of the contractual obligations and some of the contracts that you would have with all the different unions would actually cost more. So it's something you'd really have to look at. I just think that would be a big problem to merge all the schools together, or police departments or fire departments, and still have the same response time and the same service. So one of the big things for me is Council on Aging. I'm just involved with them, and I just would be concerned with senior services. I just think the Meals on Wheels programs and the in-home services that they offer to help keep seniors in their home, if that was eliminated or reduced greatly, how many seniors would have to move into senior apartments? and it would backfire, and they would have to sell their home anyway. So some of the proposals to increase property taxes, to increase taxes if property taxes were eliminated are up here. So increase the state sales tax. Right now it's 5.75%. Counties can add on to that. In Lake County we're at 7.25%. But the problem with this idea is if you're too out of line with all the other states around you, you're going to cause a severe problem with your businesses and what they're able to sell. Taxing food. Right now we don't tax food. Larger payroll taxes, income taxes, user taxes. So there's even some talk if you contact the police, you contact the fire, there's a user fee. That's an emergency service. I don't think that's a good idea. Local levies. If you're driving on certain roads, that would all be something that could be an additional tax. All right, so I wanted to kind of answer a lot of the questions I've heard over the last year about what about all the other taxes the state of Ohio receives. So you have this list, what the state of Ohio has in the budget and where the money comes from. So you have a sales and use tax of $14 billion. You have a personal income tax of $10 billion. You have commercial activity, $6 million. Gas tax lien, gas tax, which I don't have the total amount, but it's 3.5 cents every time you buy a gallon of gas. Cigarette tax, alcohol beverage tax, and property taxes down here, $23.9 billion. So it kind of gives an idea, just a really general idea of the state budget. But one of another question I've run into a lot is, how about sin taxes? Why can't we use sin taxes to replace property taxes? Well, this is the money that comes from sin taxes. It's already in the state budget. You have medical marijuana and adult use. That is a growing tax because I believe over the next couple of years it said it's going to increase. Gambling, 26 million. Alcohol, 100 to 150 million. And the Ohio Lottery, a lot of people talk about, why isn't the Ohio Lottery paying for all the schools? Why aren't they paying for everything? Well, people gamble a lot. They're gambling $4 billion a year, which is amazing. They're gambling that much. And $1.4 billion last year went to the state education fund. That's a lot of money. So that's a big benefit to the schools. So I cannot imagine wanting people to gamble to generate a profit of $23.9 billion. I don't think that's a wise endeavor. So what I want to talk about is a survey I started late last year. I've got about 1,200 responses, and I want to ask everybody to take this survey. I have sent it to senators. I have sent it to some of the state representatives, and to give them the data from the survey. But the survey does ask how concerned you are about property taxes. It does ask what alternative tax sources you would like to see to lower property taxes or eliminate property taxes. It does talk about what is most important to you, the top 3 things and services that you receive that are most important. To me, it's police and fire, roads, schools. Those are my 3, but it gives you a whole long list of what is the most important to you. And then the last question is the best question, because I've got some really great responses, is just fill in the blank. What are your creative ideas about replacing or reducing property taxes? And I've had some really interesting ideas. Probably the most interesting was I talked to a group of about 60 college students, and they were probably 18 years old. None of them could have owned a house. They're probably all living with their parents. But they talked after I gave the presentation, and they all came up with the idea of a resident tax. They collectively said resident tax is what they would support, and everybody pays into the system. And I thought it was pretty interesting because they don't own a house, they don't pay property taxes, but that was their idea. So I thought it was pretty interesting. So far in the survey, The responses for replacing property taxes are reducing wasteful spending. I have a couple ideas on how they could reduce wasteful spending at the state level. They also had increased sin taxes. That was the second highest vote. And imposing a premium on luxury goods. So charge an extra tax if it's over a certain dollar amount. So for the question about the most important services you receive in the community, number one was police and fire. That was number one. Schools, number two. Roads, number three. Those were the responses. And the biggest concerns, because one of the questions is, what are you concerned with the most? If taxes are lowered or eliminated, what is the biggest concern you have? And that is school funding. That was number one. Concern for the seniors and disabled and the services that could be slashed. And support low-income families, trying to get families back on their feet, what would be eliminated or slashed in that area. So I tried to pull up suggestions on what the state budget can be reduced by, some of the different areas where they could lower their spending. And the first one I think is a pretty good idea. If there is an open position that has been open for more than 6 months, just eliminate it. Don't fill it. If it's been open that long, it probably is not needed. Just eliminate all those positions. And that right there will probably be a pretty good savings. Reform grant programs, so follow up on them, make sure that they're useful. Don't just create them and let them grow. Outcome-based budgeting, if it's not giving a positive result, maybe it needs to be looked at and eliminated. And then look at some of the federally mandated programs and see if they're really beneficial, if you're spending more than is really necessary. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody. I'm going to invite our superintendent up here, and he's going to take it from here.
Thank you. I just wanted to take a minute, and since you came to Riverside, I want to show the exact impact on Riverside and the school district of property tax reform and kind of how we operate. Dr. Zern spoke to some generalities and some averages. To provide you with some specific numbers, I think is important in this discussion moving through. And I'm going the wrong way. So a little bit of a historical perspective and the trends that are involved as to where we are here. Just some data that came out there. In 1991, homeowners and farmers paid about 47% of the school property taxes. We learned that about 60% of the property tax goes to the schools, and that was in 1991, 47% was covered by homeowners and farmers. Because of legislation changes in 2023, homeowners and farmers now pay 70%. So the burden has shifted more to the homeowner and the farmer than the businesses. So we talked about type 1 and type 2 property taxes. That burden has shifted. So what changed? The elimination of the business tangible property tax in 2005 was a huge shift. The state used to cover 12.5% of all property tax bills. That rollback has been eliminated. So typically when we put a levy out, we knew that 12.5% would come back. So when we put a renewal out, we only have, and Riverside only has one levy that we renew. Every other one is continuous. But of that levy that we renew, we continue to renew it because 12.5% of those funds are paid for by the state. So we generate money and it's a savings. That's been, so any new levy that we would put out is fully funded by the local, by the local taxpayers. That's a big change. And also, as always, we have seen an unprecedented spike in house prices in the area. As house prices rise and we are taxed to a certain level, we are required to collect 20 mils of taxes as those prices raise up. That's what typically increases your property tax. Now the state, as Dr. Zern explained, is putting some bills into work and to reform some of that, which we understand. And that kind of gradual reform needs to happen, and we agree with that. Really kind of why are we where we are? Why are we where we are? If you've ever heard Dr. Thompson, who's the Riverside Treasurer, speak, he can't go anytime without talking about House Bill 920. House Bill 920 was passed ironically in 1976. I know Dr. Jordan had a slide about that. But that was a law because of the same basic area where inflation rose so fast on prices, the inflation rate went up so high that property taxes on for schools, they just continued to rise with it. House Bill 920 went and just said, when you pass a levy, you're going to collect that much and only that much, regardless of what the millage, which is based on your appraised value, regardless of what that millage rate is, House Bill 920 says you're just collecting that amount. So your effective millage, although voted millage for maybe in the 50s, 55, I think the Riverside is 55 point something, our actually effective collective millage is 20 because of House Bill 920. So it's a check. So as property valuations increase, school tax and school input, school revenue stays flat. And that's kind of the key. Had there been any adjustment for inflation, I don't think we would go back to the ballot because we have the same rising costs as everybody else. Just to give you where Riverside is specifically in terms of our revenue. 72% of our revenue that we collect every single year comes from local property tax. That's both business and residential. In addition, 7.6% is the kickback from the state, which should be a part of the local share. So roughly 80% of our approximately $75 million total budget comes from local sources. So cutting property tax for our sake would be actually, it would be tragic. And I think that's the word that Dr. Zern used. When you look at really specifically costs, it costs us on average $83 a day to educate one student. That's the investment that we put in. From a state and federal and the business taxes, from state aid, from state funding, federal funding, as well as business taxes, so I believe that's class 2 property taxes, 46% of our budget is covered. The remaining 54% is solely on the backs of our residents, and we thank you for that every single day. But that's the truth, and that came from a lot of these changes that happened from 1991 to now. So that kind of is where we're at. And now at this point, I want to open up to all of you. If you have a question, I'm going to ask that Dr. Thompson, Dr. Zern, and Mr. Hillier from Painesville Township come up and join us as a panel to answer the impacts of that. And if you have a question or some concerns or whatever else, the microphone is right here. Please come up to the mic, speak to them, and they will be open, and we will provide any questions that you have. Don't be shy to be the first. There's no way we did this good. You guys want to start with just a comment? Anyone?
Bueller?
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 Anyone awake?
Well, I'll just piggyback briefly on where we are and why schools are financed or find themselves going back to the public. On average, Ohio public schools are back on the ballot for new money every 4.5 years. Riverside has not been on the ballot for almost 10 years for new money. That's been done accomplished for a multitude of reasons, but why do public schools find themselves on some kind of rotational basis going back on the ballot with some level of regularity? Dr. Rattino hit it, House Bill 920, but I do want to try to put it in the context that makes sense. So take whatever job you have right now, whatever it is. Let's say that you were frozen at whatever that hourly rate or that yearly salary is, and you're frozen at that in perpetuity. How long could you sustain your current standard of living? 1 year, 2 years, 3 years? Well, the answer for the school district has been 10. House Bill 920 freezes our revenue in perpetuity. It does not, other than a small amount in excise millage, and I know that school finance can be complicated, but our budget does not increase in revenue. If a tax is passed and your own personal tax bill goes up, unless you pass or unless we pass a school bond issue or operating levy, that money is not going to the schools. We're frozen. So the system is what it is, and it's very difficult to maneuver under. And for those of you that are old enough and remember 1976, you might remember inflation hit 20%. And prior to the passage of that bill, as your home value rose, even if it was on paper, as happens during inflationary periods, your tax bill went up with it, with no vote. Well, when you hit 20% inflation, the entire economy was in shambles. But what was it like for public schools? Public schools in 1976 were flush with cash, more than they knew what to do with. That's why House Bill 920 was penned. I think where it went wrong, it's now codified, by the way, in the state constitution. So very difficult to change, but I think where they went wrong was they should have capped it at some kind of growth. But that's not what happened. So just like you experience inflationary growth at home, food, utilities, et cetera, we experience right here in a much larger scale. So the idea that we're going to abolish property tax at almost $24 billion, on the surface, I can see why people would want to support that. Who wouldn't want to save $5,000 or whatever your tax bill is per year? But the impacts are catastrophic. Dr. Zurin mentioned the county commissioners of Lake County made the decision to double the piggyback and the owner occupancy. Of the 86 counties in Ohio, do you know how many of those commissioners of those other counties made that same decision? 4. 4 counties out of 86 made that decision. So you might see a savings that Dr. Zurin mentioned of $128 on your tax bill, which over the course of 12 months, I would argue most people wouldn't notice. For us, it was a $1.3 million reduction in school funding. That's significant. So in fiscal year 2029, which I'll be presenting tomorrow, fiscal year 2029, we still had cash reserves. Now, as a result of that singular decision, I'm now forecasting almost $1 million deficit, or excuse me, $4 million deficit. So you lose $1.3 million for 4 straight years, do the math. That's a pretty extensive swing at the back end of our forecast. And I would argue that it's un-American. And what I mean by that, how many taxes does the school collect that weren't approved by the voters in this school district? The answer is 0. Every tax increase we have requires at least 50.1% of the people to vote for it. So why do 3 county commissioners get to decide that your voice and your vote doesn't matter? And why did they choose that? Because it was a headline. It was a political stunt. It was a headline that had very little impact on people's true bottom line, their money in their pocket. But it sure had, check around look at Mentor, Willoughby Eastlake, all the schools in Lake County, especially the larger ones, took significant hits to our budget
I know from a school, and I believe a township standpoint, we forecast our finances 4 and 5 years out, or make decisions 4 and 5 years out instead of the immediate future and impact. And what we saw with that county commission move is that impacted us directly. We could not account for it, and so we looked to plan for every entity that comes up, and we talk about that a lot. And it didn't just impact the schools; it impacted the townships as well. It impacted the parks. It had an impact on everyone. We are forecasting, and Dr. Zern mentioned it's a 1-year reprise. We are forecasting that reprise out to continue out because we are conservative in the way that we forecast, just to make sure that that's mentioned. Until we see something different, we will continue to forecast that because we have to be conservative. We cannot run in the negative. We need to make sure that we are very prudent in how we spend your dollars. And that's the fact, is that we try to take care of your dollars in the most fiscally prudent way there. Because to be honest, there are dollars as well. I live in the district, they're Dr. Zern's dollars. We thank you for your tax dollars, so we use his as well. We use them to the best we can to make sure that our students are best prepared that they can. And I know that's all the entities. Getting to meet, in my position, I get to work with all the different townships. And when we have an event, the way the townships come together at Riverside as a hub, because we call from Leroy, we call from Concord, we call from Painesville Township when we need emergency services, when we need police and fire, the sheriff's office, as well as a countywide organization. But it is something that we pay for sheriff's officers through tax dollars to count them at our schools to make sure that our schools are safe. So these are definite direct impacts and things that we have along the way that are meaningful and make a difference. And for me, the most important thing, I know Dr. Zern says, we talk about safety services. Absolutely. That's no different from a school standpoint. My first thing every morning I wake up is I pray that we have the same amount of students at the end of the day that we did at the beginning. If I can say that, it's a good day. And then we move on. That there's no major issues. And I know when I walk into schools and I see our school resource officers, and we call 911, or we hit our panic buttons, they come quickly, and a lot of them show up. And I am very thankful for all of our safety forces. And I am scared, as the person in charge of 4,000 plus students, what happens if those forces don't exist?
First of all, I want to thank everybody for taking the time to be here this evening. It's greatly appreciated. I want to acknowledge our fire department over here. They showed up and they have their uniforms on. You guys look outstanding. Thank you very much. In the back, we have John Karlik, our service director, and we appreciate you showing as well. And Lisa, thank you. So property taxes are an issue, folks. We all know them. And the reason this movement has gained the traction it has is because we're all tired of paying and seeing the never-ending appears to be a rush of new levies coming out. I've been in office since 2014, and I know when I was running for office in 2013, they put a fire levy on the ballot, and then after I got in, there was some money that was loaned from the general fund over to the fire department, and we had to, on an advance, we had to forgive some of that, and some of it was paid back once the levy was passed, took place. So it just seems that every number of years, the funding is hitting an all. And so how that ends up playing, some of the slides that Treasurer Zern showed was how the state of Ohio was, they had the income tax at a higher value, and then they were giving more money through the local government fund, which helps fund sheriff services, road and fire for the township, but also for the schools, and they give money from the state level down. Well, over the course of time, if you track all this, and I've been doing Facebook posts on this and trying to put some information out, I've been accused of scare tactics, and I'm sure that isn't my intent. I'm a math guy, and if you show what the math does, math numbers don't lie. So if you have to make up 24, you said 23.9, the number's always around 24 million, billion, thank you, billion. If you try to make up that much money, you have basically, currently right now we have 3 major funding sources. We have sales tax, income tax, property tax, and if we abolish property taxes, then we're down to 2 major sources. Now you still have other things that the state can do. I know in Florida they have toll roads all over the place. Somebody mentioned that to me. Do you want to have toll roads? And And the state's gonna have to have a whole bunch of things to look at. So I've done the math, and I did it just on income tax. What would happen if we just did income tax? Well, it's ridiculously high, and I just don't see how that would be sustainable. You would kill business, you would kill jobs. To get the amount, I did the city of Willowick. I compared Willowick. First of all, I did Painesville Township, because that's where I'm from, right? That's where I live. And then it was like, well, you know, that if townships just need to incorporate, and that'll take care of it. That's one of the talking points on the other side of the issue, is townships just need to incorporate. And I thought, well, I don't think that's the case, but let's look into it. Let's look into it. So then I went to the city of Willowick, and I was familiar with Willowick. I grew up in Wycliffe, and I remember as a kid growing up, my dad used to say Willowick was a bedroom community. It is. It's a nice little community, very low on industrial tax base, commercial tax base, but it's a lot of residential, which is very similar to how Painesville Township is. And so after I went through the, trying to make up the, they had $6 million in property taxes. They bring in $5 million annually on income taxes, and you just do a math ratio relationship, and you come out, they would have to eventually raise the income tax when you account for the county services. Dr. Zern listed all those, and you include the library and the school district. And then, of course, the city, what they would lose, you'd have to go to like 13% income tax, which is just ridiculous. When I did Painesville Township, I think we were right around that range. I had more data to work with Willowick, because the Willoughby East Lake School District just tried to put a levy on the ballot. Well, they're trying to put something on the ballot where they're going to do an income tax. And so they said if we raise the income tax X amount of percentage, we can raise this amount of money. So it gave me another ratio to work with, and so I was able to do Willoughby, the city of Willoughby, and the city of Willowick. Make a long story short, if you do income tax, you're going to be having some kind of ridiculous amount of income tax to put onto the ballot for the residents just to sustain the services that we have today. And I think in Painesville Township, we have some pretty exceptional services between the road department, the fire department, and of course our county sheriffs in the back. And then if you go to sales tax, the state, I heard the figure initially, the State Auditors Association said it would take 21% sales tax, which is ridiculous. You can't do that. The governor came out and said 20, based upon the math calculations, again, the ratios that I was able to do, knowing how much we bring in, I calculated 18%. Okay, so both income tax and sales tax are really not possible, but if you get rid of property taxes, you got to do something. So could you do a combination of both? Well, the state's going to have to figure this out, and one of the things that frustrates me with the movement to abolish the property taxes is one of the talking points is, well, the state will have to figure it out. If you say, what's your plan? Well, the state will have to figure it out. I just think that's just crazy. You would abolish a funding mechanism that you have without having a plan in place. I just don't see that happening. So I know there's people, hopefully, I think I saw a hand go over there, so I think we've kind of generated some questions, some comments, so I'll quit talking. I would like to hear your feedback. I thought Dr. Zern did a great job with this presentation. We put it on at Painesville Township. We asked him to come up here, and so he did it up here and went a little more in depth than we did. It's a complicated issue. There aren't any easy answers. Math is math. The reality is that if we like the services that we have, they cost X amount of dollars, and if we're willing to pay for it, great. Let me just say one thing though. So where do we go? One of the points that I've made is I support reform. I don't support abolishing property taxes because you blow up the system, as I said. I support reform. People have said we've had 30 years for reform, and so they've had their chance, and so now let's just blow it up and let the state figure it out. Again, if you blow up the one mechanism, now you're down to two, so that's kind of dangerous. But that's an uphill battle getting the state to get into it and to reform. It's going to take everybody. And to be quite honest, people say, well, Chuck, what are you doing? Well, I've been on the phone with my state representative, Jamie Calendar, I've talked to him, you know, have some new people running in the fall. I've spoken to one of the candidates, Jesse Stiles. I've spoken with Jerry Serino. I'm asking everybody to please contact your state representatives, your state elected officials. These are the people that are going to have to make that change. And this is a real movement, and there's some damn valid points. When we do budgets in Painesville Township, and Josh Pennock is here somewhere, I lost him, but when we pass levies in Painesville Township, we've always tried to not go back to the voters for 10 to 15 years period of time, and we've made that our goal. Is we've watched the money and try to stretch it out as far as we can, and we've been successful doing that. But under the current format, we're coming back every 10 to 15 years for more fire levies, more road levies, more sheriff deputy levies, and that's not sustainable either. So why could the state provide more funding back in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s? As the one slide mentioned, tangible personal property tax was a major cut, and the homestead exemption was another cut. The state can do more, they need to do more, and we, as the constituents of the state, we need to do our part. They listen to the voters more than they listen to the elected officials. I mean, this is kind of the reality of what I'm getting. So please, take it to heart and contact them, and with that, I saw a hand go up before, so I'll quit talking.
I'm going to make a comment real quick, but yeah, if anybody has questions, please come up and ask them. I just want to thank everybody for coming out. This is a real concern, a real issue with property taxes, and the more involvement, the better. I do think in 2024, when house values were reevaluated, it really brought this issue to light. And for the first time, there has been some real reform. And last year, in December, there were the 5 bills that were passed that really are starting to make a difference in property taxes. And I think that is the path forward to getting relief on property taxes and getting change, to blow up a system that is paying for all these local services where the local communities actually can vote and decide themselves what is important to them. You know, what is most important to you, where you want to live, to give up that right to vote on your community and send that to the state, I think would be a big issue, would be a big problem. But I also think to put pressure on your state reps, your commissioners, and your state senators, and let them know that some of these proposed bills that give relief to seniors, that is a big issue, or to protect seniors from losing their homes. These are some really good proposals. I have not seen these in the past where they've gone nowhere, but to push them through, I think will make a big difference. And I think that's actually the solution if we look at it in the long run. Let's get tax relief where it comes down a little bit and protect what vulnerabilities we see in property taxes. I think that would be the path forward.
So I will bring the mic down and I will come to you. So if you have a question, put your hand up and I will deliver it to you. That makes it a little bit easier.
Actually, I got a ton of questions, but I want to start with, let's go back a few years when the Supreme Court of Ohio was told our legislature that our school funding was illegal. And nothing has been done, but I haven't heard anybody other than people say, how is that going to get resolved? That's the only question I ever heard. I've never heard a single possible solution for funding the schools come out of our state house down in Columbus. But you guys aren't the people that can answer that question. But maybe you can answer, first of all, if we voted for 55 mils of tax, but that is equal to, let's just say $3 million, okay? And now, the amount of money that I pay in my tax bills still seems to be going up, but you still only get the part of that gives you the $3 million. Where does that other money go that I am paying? Where does that go? I wanted to go to school. I voted for the school. Why is it not going to the school? Where is it going to instead? It's coming out of I see it go, but I don't know where exactly. I don't try to do the math every single year I get a tax bill. When I vote for a school levy, I vote for the school levy. When I vote for the park levy, I vote for the park levy. When I vote for the roads and the fire and all those things, I vote for them. does the amount of money that was voted for the police also get limited? Does the amount of money for the library also get limited? Or is it only schools that get capped at this? Somebody, you understand what I'm asking?
Yes, I do. So to illustrate what he's saying, so if we pass a levy, let's say this November we passed a levy for 4 mills. That's voted millage, and it would start off, 4 mills would be assessed to your home based on your home's value. 35% of your home's value is what is taxed. So 4 mills would increase. But over the course of time, as property values continue to increase, which they most often do, there's been a few historical times where they haven't. 2007, if you might remember, saw some home values decrease, but generally speaking, they rise. So what the county auditor has to do is, if we keep collecting 4 mills 2 years later, 3 years later, 4 years later, then we're in violation of House Bill 920. We start to collect more money than what we passed originally in November, say this past November. So the county auditor has to ratchet down, recalculate the mills, and that's called effective mills. So we've passed 55 mills, but we're collecting 20 because of the impact of House Bill 920. So, like I think it's been mentioned earlier, we collect of local property taxes about roughly 60% of those go to public schools. But there are other entities that need the money just as much as public schools do: police, fire, recs, the programs, the Meals on Wheels, and the list is long. Those entities are not impacted by House Bill 920. Public schools are impacted by House Bill 920.
I think the other thing to any type of property tax reform is to make the system simpler. If you watch the beginning of Dr. Zern's presentation and all of the numbers and collected versus not collected and all that, it's a very complex system. And I think that makes it challenging in itself, because there's inside millage and outside millage. And inside millage actually goes up, and that goes up with inflation. So as your home rises, any type of value increase, all of that inflation comes to the school, and the maximum of that any is 10 mils, and that's dispersed amongst the schools, the parks, the townships, kind of all of that equally. It's up to 10 mils. But that is non-voted inside millage, and it's they have capped that in one of these bills to rise only with inflation up to, I believe it's 3%. Yes. So even if inflation goes up 5%, that most your property tax bill, because of this new one, in which makes it is 3%, you can expect that and kind of budget for that. I think that's but it is so complex to figure out what actually is a mill and what isn't. Basically, when you pass a school levy, we have to put a millage on there because they say we have to, but it is for a fixed dollar amount for the rest of the life. So if it's a continuous levy and we pass a 5 mil levy, and that 5 mil levy collects $10.2 million, for the rest of eternity that we're collecting, it's only going to be $10.2 million. So that 5 mil levy by the end of it, or even to now, is collecting at probably 1 mil or 1 point. So it continues to deliver. That's what makes it tough. When you talk about how this reform is, you get lost in the minutia of the numbers and everything else that comes to it, but that really is the impact. And to make it even more fun, it collects different for residential property than it does for commercial. So that makes it even more fun when you talk about all that. So it really is a complex issue that we're trying to put simple solutions to, and really we need to make the system simpler.
So you got a question in the back, I'm going to head that way. So let me just follow up from a township standpoint, and I guess a good example would be our sheriff's department in the back. We have 2 policing levies. Total, they generate about 1.6 million, like 800,000 apiece. They're always going to generate about that amount. Now, when they build new houses and there's new things going in, we get a slight uptick. we don't get a significant uptick, but there's a slight uptick. So basically that 1.6 mil it's gonna stay that number pretty close to it. It'll be, like I said, new houses will give you a little bit more, but it doesn't change significantly. The inside millage, we've had it, I tracked it from 2001 through 2025, and as property values go up and down, inside millage goes up and down too, and so we were receiving less and having to provide the same services when property values went down. I moved here in 05, and then the housing bubble hit after that. It wasn't until about 10 years later before the numbers start really coming back up again. We took a huge increase on inside millage with this last property reevaluation. That's kind of what's blown everything off the roof.
Just had a quick question. We've only discussed whether to abolish property tax or leave it as is. I was wondering, I have two questions. First question is there a middle ground? Can we just say, well, we'll cut property tax in half, so we're not totally abolishing it, we're not totally leaving it as it is? Is that a possibility? And then say, okay, we'll tax sin tax. That's just an example. We'll tax sin tax higher, and then that'll cover the, what we're missing from the full property tax. My second question is there are a lot of people who would like to buy a home for the first time, and a lot of people say, well, I can't afford, or, it costs too much. I've heard a real estate agent say, and I don't know if it's true anymore, but it was in 2022, she said that if you are a, so to speak, second or third time home buyer, it's easier to buy a second or third home if you have a first home, because you have that money. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, if they were to, the state of Ohio were to abolish the property tax, would first-time home buyers have an easier time to buy their first home because they don't have to pay property tax? Do you think that would be helpful?
I'm going to address a couple of the questions. I think there were a few of them in there. There has been a discussion of pulling the school tax out of property tax and having that paid for by Columbus, and that would roughly reduce property taxes in half, because just over half are school taxes. The problem is you lose control locally. What do you want in your school system? Do you want particular programs? What do you want in your community? And that is the problem with that approach. If you take everything to Columbus and everybody's put on the same level, and you want more in your community for your children, or for the children, be educated in the community, more opportunities or more activities, you would lose that. So that would be the issue with if you took the approach of just pulling the school component out of property taxes.
Dr. Stern, that's a great point. I want to talk about I'm sorry to interrupt, but that's a really good point. I want to kind of hit on that too. Part of your property taxes don't just pay for operating expenses. We talk a lot about operating expenses. They also pay for the buildings and the infrastructure that we have. So the 2 new schools we built, we took out 35-year or 36-year bonds against those buildings. Property taxes are abolished. We can default on those bonds. I believe, so when municipal townships and school districts, we use property taxes, we ask the voters for property taxes to actually be our loan that are in, and to pay for the cost of new construction. So it's not just operational, it's also infrastructure. Sorry.
Yeah, I think the second question was about affordability for new homes, for a new first-time home buyer.
My question was, if we either abolish property taxes or we cut property taxes, would that help first-time home buyers be able to afford a house? Would they?
Yeah, it would make houses more affordable, but the problem is, I actually researched this question. I used Grok, ChatGPT, and all the other AI models, and the answer that it came up with was there would be a flood of outside investors coming into Ohio because there would be no property tax. So if they're going to save $400 a month because the taxes are roughly $4,800 a year, Now the property is more affordable, and the person you're trying to make it more affordable for, the first-time homebuyer, all of a sudden, there's all these investors coming in, grabbing up the property because they're less expensive. So initially, AI is saying that would actually cause a bigger problem. Maybe down the road, a few years later, it may not, but it would have the opposite effect with outside investors outside of the state of Ohio. And those were multiple AI questions that I put out there. I don't know if that helps answer the question.
I would also say the concept of cutting taxes in half would be detrimental to public schools as well. It would be equivalent to you as a homeowner or you as a resident saying, or your employer saying to you, we're going to cut your pay in half. To operate with half of our local property taxes we couldn't operate. We're a service industry. 80% of our budget is people, and that's what public education is. And the whole movement, I asked the question to one of the leaders of this movement, what is the problem that we're trying to solve by abolishing property tax? The litany of responses, but the main response was, we're taxing elderly people out of their homes. We're making it so older people can't even afford to keep their home. Is that true? That's not supported by the data. We know that in Lake County, for the last 5 years, how many elderly people have been foreclosed on? The answer is 0. And overall general public, I went back 10 years. On average, what do you think the percentage is of any people who get foreclosed on? It's 0.4%. 0.4%.
The Treasurer's Office, we do have the ability to foreclose on property, and our approach the last 5 years is simply abandoned and blighted property. If you live in a community and a house has been vacant for multiple years, it is miserable. The grass is too high, there's rodents in the property, possibly there's damage on the inside with utilities not functioning. You need somebody to fix that if you live near a house like that. And what the Lake County Treasurer's Office, our approach is, if it's abandoned or blighted, we do start foreclosure. And we want to put that house back in service. We want somebody to buy the house, to get the land bank involved, either to rehab it or tear it down, because somebody needs to solve a problem. And if it's abandoned or blighted, that is something we focus on. If it is somebody who lives in the property, owner occupied, we do absolutely everything we can. We reach out to them, we research grants, we listen to what is going on, because sometimes it's medical, sometimes it's divorce, sometimes there's all these different situations. And the last thing we want to do is take that house. We will do everything we can to work with that individual. And if they're on homestead or if they're disabled, we will not foreclose on the house. That is our stance. So I just want to make that clear, just in Lake County. But that should be statewide. There shouldn't be the option of foreclosing on a senior's house or a disabled person's house. That should be a statewide legislation, and that's why I like that one piece of legislation I talked about earlier.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Zern, for coming in tonight and just giving us all that information. I think it's super helpful. Just want to circle back to the first question we had from the gentleman in the front. I think I'm the fiscal officer in Concord Township, and our residents have the same question of where does the money go? And so last year, we actually put on 4 separate classes, recorded them, they're on our YouTube channel, and it's purely understanding your tax bill. And it goes line by line. We explain exactly where every penny, every dollar is going, similar to what Dr. Zern had up earlier. It can be somewhat confusing if it's your first time really trying to dive into those details. So I certainly would encourage everyone to just watch that. It's a 2-part series on YouTube. I actually posted that in one of the Facebook groups that was pushing to abolish property taxes. It was not well received, even though I prefaced it with, this is purely informational. I was not looking for extended dialogue, although I did get that, much of it very rude, but that's okay. I did want to circle back also to what was just brought up in terms of capital investment and the long-term debt. So right now in Ohio, based on everything that I've researched, there's about $60 billion of long-term debt at the local government. And primarily funded, that debt is serviced by property taxes. So I guess I'm just curious if there's any comment from the panel. Property taxes goes away, $60 billion worth of long-term debt that gets defaulted on. What is is there a solution? Because the overnight credit rating of the state plummets. We are no longer able to bring in any kind of new capital projects, infrastructure at competitive prices. We're looking to pay 150, 200 basis points higher than our neighboring states, and I would assume we know who's paying for that. That's the taxpayers. And so we talk about the schools, it's super important. We talk about police, fire, all of these services, but no one's even discussed the defaulting on these bonds, the credit rating of the state, and the long-term impact of any future projects, infrastructure, capital, that we would even have the ability to finance at competitive rates. So I'm just curious if there's been any discussion or thought at the county or state level.
That is a great question regarding the debt that is out there, because you're talking about a lot of debt that is out there for 30 to 35 years. That's $60 billion in the state of Ohio. So that is a huge concern. I don't hear any discussion on that, but if property taxes were eliminated, you don't have a component to pay it. And you're talking $60 billion, and that's pushed out 30 to 35 years, and the rate is 3 to 5%. You could do the math on the actual monthly, on the actual annual payments on those bonds. It would be devastating, and that is nothing that has been talked about. That is a fantastic question, and it would have to be paid for. They couldn't default. You're talking, 5%. What is that? $300 million a year in interest payments, and that's secured by property taxes.
Yeah, and I was curious, so I contacted multiple bond counsel. I was like, what happens? The universal opinion was it just immediately defaults, and there is no return. There's no point of return. That credit rating plummets, and that's a process that's going to take decades to repair. I hear in some of these groups, well, the state's responsible for paying for schools. They will pick it up. They will figure it out. Well, day one, future infrastructure, future capital projects, I have not heard one solution for that. So hopefully that's something that's being considered as well.
Ironically, today, just this afternoon, Mr. Patrizzi and I and Dr. Rutino were on a call with Moody's, which is a rating agency. We get a credit rating just like you do as an individual. And as you know, if you have a personal credit rating of 400, or you have a personal credit rating of 800, the interest that you're going to pay on that loan, whether you can even qualify for that loan, is significantly impacted by your credit rating. Or your credit score. We have a credit rating. And I don't know how many questions were repeated over and over from Moody's, asking questions about all the various House bills, and the actions of our county commissioners was central to that conversation, which we could be, as a school district, we don't know this yet, hopefully not, but we could be downgraded in our credit rating. If that occurs, the project that we're in the middle of, Buckeye Elementary, could cost substantially more in our payment, just like if your interest rate goes up for any kind of loan you were to take out. So these things are real. Just the talk of it and what's been done so far has caught the attention of Moody's and other national rating agencies, and it's impacting public schools and what we can do as we speak. So that's a great question.
All right, anybody else? I think we'll take one more in the interest of time. Oh, sorry, didn't see it.
So, yeah, this last tax increase for Lake County was pretty significant, or the value increase. Mine was, I probably can't sell my house for what it's valued for right now. So I just want to say thank you for that. So with that, you know, comes the tax raise. So what percentage of, so in my opinion, and I want to understand this a little bit better, and what percentage of this increase is the school board getting? I know this is not a school board, and I'm not for abolishing, by the way, the property taxes. We need our fire folks. My father was a fire chief. I have family, extended family that's in law enforcement and fire also, and aspiring. My daughter's aspiring school teacher. So, you know, I do not agree with the abolishment. There needs to be a definite reform across the board in every community, from the state down. So I just want to get that. But to go back to my question, what percentage of that tax increase countywide or district-wide does the school get?
I think you're asking when the reappraisal comes and your home values increase, and you see you may see an increase in taxes for yourself. Yeah, could be quite a bit, right? But your question is how much of that goes to the school district, I believe. Is that correct? How's that? Well, so I'll give you a great example. Let's say Amazon builds a 3 million square foot building distribution center in Paynesville Township. One would assume the school district's going to collect a lot of taxes from that. Is that true? The answer is no. The answer is zero. Zero. House Bill 920, which we've already talked about, but that's a great illustration. It freezes us. The only way Amazon is going to help on taxes or your home valuation going up is if we pass a new levy. The new levy would collect at let's say we pass 4 mills. Those mills would be valuated at 35% of your property valuation. So let's say your house is now valued at $500,000. You're going to pay 4 more mills on that valuation, 35% of that valuation. Amazon would pay taxes. But also remember, if we abolish property taxes, if that were to happen, and the state were forced to collect it in another way, whether that's income tax or whatever they might come up with, are businesses taxed on income tax? No. It's a free pass for businesses. Think about that. Think about adding the burden to property owners when they think they're doing themselves a favor, but are you? The answer to me is clearly no. Abolishing property tax is not the answer, and when your reappraisal comes up, we do not receive any additional dollars, with the exception, not trying to get too complicated, but with the exception of those 4.8 mills, which are inside mills, which is capped at 3% increase. That's the only increase that the school district would see, which is fairly minimal to our overall budget.
So one of the things to talk about, again, it's a complex problem because when your house value went up, the neighborhood next to you, they may have seen a decrease in their values. So it's a collective increase, which means certain people are impacted in a different way. So we talk about, hey, what's the overall, we talk about the average increase in Lake County. I forget the actual number, but let's use 20-some percentage. That means that that's an average. So some houses went up by a lot more, others didn't go up as much. So some people in this reevaluation cycle actually saw a decrease in their property taxes because of the way their house was valued from the past 3 years or 6 years. So it's not a simple, hey, everything's going up on that, and that's, again, it's a complex problem, and we're trying to put a simple solution to a complex problem. Okay. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. If you do have further questions or have some outside ideas, please, I encourage you to take Dr. Zern's survey. Please reach out to myself or Dr. Thompson as well. We are in this all together. We appreciate you here, and please reach out and thank you again.